crazy that engine would just fucking fly off. At least that's what it looked like. I don't know if that's the case, but I think everybody's pretty much in agreement the engine came off. But apparently we got new pictures too, so let's go ahead and jump straight into this, man. See what the hell we got, man. I feel sorry for the crew, dude. Like they I don't even think they had a shot.
All right, folks, the NTSB preliminary report on UPS 2976 literally just hit the street about an hour ago. We've been poring over it here, looking at all the details, and what happened to that aircraft is shocking, but it's got explicit details, and now we know why they've grounded the entire DC-10 and MD-11 fleet at the same time. It has to do with those engine pylons, and this tracks all the way back to May 25th, 1979, and American Airlines Flight 191.
Yeah, didn't they? I think they had something similar to that happen on that same type aircraft where the engine came off back in, like you said, 79. That's fucking crazy, dude.
But first of all, let's focus on UPS 2976. What happened? Okay, according to the NTSB report just out, on November 4th, 2025, about 17:14 Eastern Time, that's 5:14 in the afternoon, United Parcel Service Flight 2976 of Boeing McDonnell Douglas MD-11 aircraft was destroyed after it impacted the ground shortly after takeoff from runway 17 right at Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport in Louisville, Kentucky. The 3 crew members aboard the airplane and 11 people on the ground were
You know, and you know what the sad thing was? Is that thing was fully loaded down. They had they had it stuffed with packages, and they had full fuel. They had that thing loaded. Had that thing just, man, I feel so bad for them, dude.
Injured, and our hearts go out to all those folks that lost their lives and the families that were impacted by that. This is truly a tragedy, but we need to get to the bottom of what caused this to make sure that nothing like this happens again in the future. The report goes in to talk a little bit about the history of Flight 2976, and then it gets into some pictures we haven't seen before. So let's give you a view of the 6 shots now that they have from the front and left.
Oh, shit, dude. Like, what the hell? Look at those pictures. Engine just took flight on its own, man. Damn. Yeah, I haven't seen these pictures yet. Holy shit. Damn, dude. No wonder why they didn't have enough power to get off the ground. See, that's why I don't fly airliners, man. You know, they say flying is the safest. No, I don't think so. Not when your engines are coming off.
Side of 2976 as it's on its takeoff roll. And as you're looking at these photos in progression, it's shocking. Photo number 1, everything looks normal. So they're at that point where they've gotten past V1. The pilot monitoring has said rotate.
Now, I'm not a pilot, but I know that when they say V1, I know that's like their decision point where they have to take off, or they got to decide if they're going to take off or stop, because at that point they don't have enough runway to stop. They got to take flight. So that could have happened at like the worst possible time.
They've lifted the nose of the aircraft off. Everything up to this point looks, according to the pictures, completely normal. At this point, they're expecting to climb out. But a split second later, in photo number 2, you can see that left engine now is begun to come up and over the top of the left wing. Something let loose in the pylon. More details about the pylon here in a minute because the report goes into it. Then you can see in photo number 3, it has started a fire. That engine has now completely departed the aircraft. It's almost basically right on top of the wing. You can see it go almost straight up. Now, why would it depart and go over the top of the wing? Why wouldn't it go underneath the wing? Well, the engines are what's creating the thrust for this airplane to get forward.
Probably from all that power, because they got all that thrust coming out the back of the engine. So I would assume it would do that. I would think.
forward. So in essence, all three of these engines are pulling this aircraft into the air. So those engines are actually a little bit forward of the wing, the actual physical engine themselves. So it's pulling this aircraft along, creating lift over the wings. At some point, the airplane is going to fly on its own with the help of those engines. But at this point, the aft, not the forward, but the aft mounting bolt or the mounting assembly gives way. That
Damn.
engine is still producing thrust, trying to pull that airplane forward. It's now going to pull itself up over. It's going to break the forward mount. It's going to now go airborne. As you can see in photo number 5, there's just a full-blown fireball as the engine now has departed over the top and the back of the airplane. And then in photo number 6, you can see some flame there at the very back. Mm-hmm. That flame now is coming out of the number 2 engine, not the number 3 engine. Now, I had reported on my initial analysis that I thought it was the right engine that was also compressor stalling, because it would make sense that if that left engine had failed and the shrapnel had gone out, it would have hit that other engine on the other side. Now we know, according to the NTSB report, that it was not the engine that failed. So that CF6 engine, nobody's looking at that CF6 engine. It's a fine engine. No problems with the engine. It was the mount that went loose, and that engine came over the top. Now there's shrapnel and everything else coming out of that engine as it's coming apart, going over the top. It would clearly get ingested into that number 2 or the tail-mounted engine.
Damn.
And you can see in photo number 6, a little bit of flame coming out the back.
See, now that fucking sucks, dude. So so they had the right engine still working, but when that left engine departed, it hit the one in the tail. No wonder why they couldn't get off the ground. They can't get off. Now, see, if that tail one was still working, they probably would have been able to get off the ground. Ah, that sucks, man. That's a crucial point too, man.
Of that number 2 engine. That was the engine that was compressor stalling. The analysis is still the same. Whether it was the number 2 or the number 3 engine, that aircraft only had one fully operating engine. And it makes that yaw moment and the rolling moment to the left even more dramatic, because the only engine producing full power at this point was the one on the right wing. So it goes on in the report to say this. The airplane initially climbed but did not get higher than 30 feet above the ground. Well, we knew that from the pictures.
Jeez.
I think
didn't get any higher than 30 feet off the ground. Holy shit.
The initial report was 400 feet, and that was way off from the beginning. And that's according to the radio altitude data from the flight data recorder. Based on FAA-provided ADS-B data, the last data point shows 481 feet mean sea level. That's not what happened. It wasn't that high at all.
No,
so the airplane cleared the blast fence beyond the end of runway 17 right, but the left engine main gear impacted the roof of the UPS Supply Chain Solutions warehouse at a southern edge of the airport. And you can see that picture in front of you. And then next, the airplane then impacted a storage yard and 2 additional buildings, including a petroleum recycling facility, and was mostly consumed by fire. The wreckage area continued through the UPS warehouse at for about 3,000 feet ahead of them. The accident site debris was centered, and it gives you the lat long here in the report. So we can see one final image of the airplane now on fire on the left-hand side. The airplane starting to yaw to the left. The gear is still down, but it's going to impact that building, and it's going to start that rolling descent and impact on the left side of the aircraft. All right.
Isn't that crazy, though, that crew got in there and they had no idea? Like, it was just going to be a normal, regular flight. Like, that would have been the last thing I'm sure that was on their mind, is that one of their engines is going to fucking fly off right when they're taking off. Jeez. See, now, if that had just happened, if that could have happened just like sooner, they might have had enough runway where they could have aborted the takeoff. But that was like the worst possible time.
about the crew experience a little bit. They talk about retrieving the flight data recorders and so forth. We know that because they've got the information from the flight data recorders. Talks a little bit about the history of the MD-11, and then it gets into the detail about the pylon and the wing connection. And here's where it really, really gets interesting.
Okay.
The left number 1 engine and the number 3 engine, which is on the right wing, those engines of the MD-11 are attached to the underside of the pylons that are in turn attached to the underside of each wing. And there's actually 4 attachments. There's 2 that attach to the motor, to the engine, and there's 2 that attach with the pylon to the wing. It's the wing pylons that we're looking at. The center number 2 engine is attached to the base of the vertical stabilizer. So it's a very distinctive look, the DC-10 and the MD-11, where that second engine is up there in the tail. That's the one that was compressor stalling because it ingested, obviously, the shrapnel from the number 1 engine departing. The left and right pylon attaches to their respective wing via a forward-mounted bulkhead, a thrust link assembly, and an aft mount bulkhead. And they say in the report, for simplification, this report will refer to these bulkheads as the forward mount and the aft mount, and I'm going to refer to it that way going forward as well. The forward mount contains 2 spherical bearings that are vertically aligned, upper and lower, that attach to the wing. And there's a picture of that right here, or a schematic of that, where you can see where it's like a round thing that holds a bearing. It's a spherical bearing. That's what's in play here. The wing clevis is the thing that's got the dotted line, and then there's the aft lug and the forward lug. All of those things are real important for us to note.
So being that this happened back in 1979 on this like same identical airplane, why you would think they would have had this issue fixed? Like, why would it happen again? What, 79, 89, 99 to the almost 40 years later.
Take a look at that right now. We'll come back to that in a minute. All right, the report goes on, and here's where it gets down into the nitty-gritty of exactly what happened. The left pylon aft mounts, forward and aft lugs, were both found fractured near the 2 o'clock and the 9 o'clock position. So as I'm looking at you right here, this is 12 o'clock. 2 o'clock's right about here. 9 o'clock's right about here. So they're saying that those 2 basically round mounts were broken here and here. Right? If you think about it as a donut, it was broken at the 2 o'clock and the 9 o'clock position. But it's talking about the aft mount on the wing, not the forward mount. Now, the forward mount's going to give way here because of the stresses on it. But as they get into the details about what happened to that aft mount, they're going to tell you something.
So probably what happened is the aft mount was fractured or gave way, and then the front mount or the front aft mount just gave way from all the stress after the back one had popped.
You need to know about that aft mount, which is what contributed to that engine coming off in the crash of the airplane. Let me read on. The fractured and separated upper portions of the forward and aft lugs were found adjacent to runway 17 right. So they ended up off the side of the runway. The left wing clevis, aft mount spherical bearing, and aft mount attached hardware were found with a portion of the left wing at the accident site. So some of it stayed on the airplane and some of it was ejected and came off. The bolt, spherical bearing, and associated hardware remain attached to the wing clevis. The spherical bearing outer race had fractured circumferentially, all right, around the outside of it, in other words, exposing the ball element. So if you think about the donut now fracturing on its edge all the way around, that also happened here.
God dang, dude.
It goes on to show some pictures of the actual airplane and the damage to it. And you can see the spherical damage down there where it talks about spherical bearing. It's fractured around the whole outside of it. All right. It goes on to give some more details. And here's where it gives exactly what happened to UPS 2976. All right. After initial cleaning of the fractured surfaces, examination of the left pylon aft mount. So number 1 engine, aft mount where it attaches to the wing, so not the forward mount, but the aft mount lug. Fractures found evidence of fatigue cracks in addition to areas of overstress failure. So they're
Oh,
looking at this and they're able to examine it and say there were some fatigue cracks in it pre-existing.
wow.
On the
So it was just a matter of time before that was gonna happen. That fucking sucks, dude. Like, don't they do inspections on that shit though? Or do you just put it on and then like nobody ever looks at it again until it fucking snaps off or an engine comes off?
on the aft lug, on both the inboard and outboard fracture surfaces, a fatigue, and I circled this, a fatigue crack was observed where the aft lug bore met the aft lug forward face.
Face.
So where those things attach, there was some fatigue cracking. Now this is an old airplane. It's had a lot of cycles. I'm going to tell you how many cycles here in a minute, but there were some fatigue cracks that they found after the fact. It goes on. For the forward lug's inboard fracture surface, now it's talking about the forward lug, not the aft. So the aft one was the one that had the stress fractures in it. Now they're going to talk about the forward. Was it fractured as well? For the forward lug's inboard fracture surface, fatigue cracks were observed along the lug bore, but that doesn't mean they were pre-existing. For the forward lug's outboard fracture surface, the fracture consisted entirely of overstress with no indication of fatigue cracking. What does that mean to you and me? It means when the aft one let loose and all of that stress came on that forward
On the front
pylon,
one,
it let loose as well.
It gave away,
but it was due to, as they say here, overstress, not a pre-existing fatigue crack.
But you would think that they would freaking have like a something in place where, I mean, that seems like a bad design. You know, you got your forward aft, your back aft. I would think they would have something in place, like if either one of those gave, that there would be something in place because if you lose just one and then your whole engine's going to come off because the other one can't hold it, you would think you would have some kind of support to help with that. That seems like a design
The
flaw to
aft
me.
mount had that pre-existing fatigue cracking. That's why it let loose. The forward top flange of the aft mount assembly was examined for indications of deformation, and for pre-existing fractures, but no indications were found.
Damn.
So there's the preliminary report on what happened to the forward and the aft mounting points of the pylon for the number one engine. The aft one had pre-existing fatigue cracks, and the forward one didn't.
So-
it eventually cracked, but it was due to overstress, not pre-existing
Right.
fatigue.
So being that there was pre-existing fractures, it was just a matter of time. God dang, man. You would just think they would have something in place. Okay, kind of like jewelry repair, right? For those, you don't need no jewelry repair to get this. Like you got a ring, right? Say it's a solitaire. You got there's 4-prong heads and there's 6-prong heads. A 6-prong head is going to be better than a 4-prong because with a 4-prong, if you lose one, the other 3 it don't matter. The stone's coming out, right? But if you got a 6-prong head, you've actually got to lose 2 before the stone will come out. You would think they would have something similar. I use that as an analogy for something to be like similar for this. You would think they'd have something in place to safeguard where if one of those breaks, that the engine is not just going to come flying off. Something to hold it and then you can repair it later. Oh, geez, man.
Goes on now to talk about how many cycles the aircraft has been through. And it's no surprise here, it's been through a lot of cycles.
Holy
At the
shit,
time of
dude.
the accident, November 259 Uniform Papa, which is the tail number of this aircraft, had accumulated a total of 92,992
Holy
hours and 21,043 cycles. And what are cycles? Every time it goes flying, right?
Damn. 92,000, almost 93,000 hours. And this thing is taken off and landed 21,000 times. God dang, dude. Like you would think at some point, just like a car, I've noticed this. I don't know why. But with airplanes, like it's like they'll fly them until one crashes. Then when one crashes, they might start thinking about retiring them. I don't get it, man. You would think they'd have like a limit, like say, hey, this is the max amount of hours because over time, the the flexing of the wings. I know they do maintenance on them, but you can only do so much maintenance, kind of like with a car, right? Or any kind of vehicle. You can do maintenance on it, but there comes a point where the maintenance is just too much or it's not worth it and the car's got too many miles on it. You would think they would do that with planes, but it seems like they just run them until they crash and just hope they don't crash. I don't know.
Every time they go flying,
This
it's
is
a
why I
cycle.
don't fly.
So over 21,000 cycles. The accident airplane was maintained under a continuous airworthiness maintenance program, which most major airlines are under. A review of the inspection tasks for the left pylon aft mount found both a general visual inspection. All right, so they go and they look at it. That's different than like a borescope inspection. They actually go look at it with a set of eyeballs. And a detailed visual inspection of the left pylon aft mount required by UPS's maintenance program at a 72-month interval every 5 years. Seems like a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's
Every
a big
5
gap.
years, they're required to go in and inspect those forward and aft mounts. It was last accomplished on October 28th, 2021. It's been over 4 years since somebody has had their eyeballs on the forward or the aft mount
Dang.
pylon.
And doing a visual inspection, they're not going to be able to see fatigue cracks. Like just looking at it, they're not going to be able to tell that.
A 24-month, 4,800-hour lubrication task of the pylon thrust links and pylon spherical bearings was last accomplished on October 18th, 2025. That was just last month. That was just a few weeks ago. So that wasn't that long ago, but that's, again, putting grease on these bearings, and a full-on inspection are two different things. A special detailed inspection of the left pylon aft mount lugs would have been due at 29,200 cycles. As you recall, we're only a little over 21,000. They had
See, this just goes to show you, this is why I don't fly. I mean, when you get on a plane, especially if it's an airliner, Delta, Southwest, whoever, the plane you're getting on, you don't even know how old that plane is. You don't even know how many cycles that plane's been through. Shit, you could be getting on a plane that's got stress fractures like this one. Like the crew, when they got on, they had no idea this was going to happen. I don't know. This is why I don't fly, y'all, because it's like a vehicle, man. Eventually a vehicle breaks. I like to be on the ground when something breaks. I don't want to be 30,000 feet in the air when the engine's quit, or an alternator goes out, or your engine departs your aircraft. This is why I don't fly, y'all.
about another 8,000 cycles to go before they were required to take a look at those mounting lugs. And of the left wing clevis support would have been at 28,000. So the clevis and the mount, two different times, but they were again 7,000 or 8,000 cycles from now before they were required to take a look at those again. So that now is a preliminary report from the NTSB. So what we know in the recap is this. On November 4th, that airplane started to get airborne. The aft mount pylon, the pylon's aft mount, forward and aft, the aft mount on the number one engine had pre-existing fatigue cracks. Those cracks gave way to a failure of the aft mount. The engine, which is now producing max power and pulling the airplane into the air, began to point upwards. It overstressed the forward mount. The whole engine comes up and over the top of the wing. It then begins to come apart. Lots of shrapnel from the wing, from the engine. The engine departs over the top. It now sends basically FOD or shrapnel into the number two engine, which is mounted in the tail. It begins to sputter and compressor stall. We can see in that last photo the flames coming out of that. I initially had said I thought it was the engine on the right wing. I got that wrong. It was hard from that angle of the picture to tell which one it was. It's now the number two engine confirmed here. by the photos. It took out that number 2 engine, less than full thrust from that. The only engine that was producing full thrust was the number 3 engine on the right wing, and sadly that was not enough thrust to get this aircraft airborne and stay airborne. They limped into the air, they reduced thrust. There was probably every light you can imagine going on up in the cockpit. The crew is not aware of the extent of the damage to their aircraft. They valiantly, heroically try to get that airplane to stay in the air. It does so for a couple of seconds. It clears the blast fence, but then they just can't maintain flight anymore, and the left main mount hits the top of the warehouse. The airplane rolls to the left, and we know the rest of the story. So at this point, that's what we know with the preliminary report. This is absolutely illuminating. And again,
and that's crazy, man. I was reading comments online where people were talking about, it was the pilot's fault and shit. I was like, no, it wasn't the pilot's fault, man. They didn't have a chance, man. Like I said, I wish that engine, if it was going to come off, it would have came off like before they got to the point where they had to take off, because then they probably could have aborted that. That was just, I feel so bad for them, man. That was that's just bad timing.
We're sad and our hearts are broken. As you know, we pray here. And after I get done with this video, we're going to go have a time of prayer and pray for those 11 families out there in Louisville, because this is a tragedy that probably could have been avoided. But at any rate, it happened. And this is how now it happened. Well, now you know.